examples of this in the stories of the Buddha's teaching is when he met the murderer Angulimala. And this was a man who had already murdered dozens of people, and he was on a quest to get a nice long necklace of thumbs so he could cut off his victims. And right, he was really lost. Yeah. And the Buddha, and everyone's terrified of him. Even the authorities trying to get a hold of him and subdue him were scared of him, right? So they only go if they have like an army to try to meet him. They're so frightened. And the Buddha wasn't frightened because that's not what the Buddha saw. The Buddha saw a man who was suffering, but also that he had the potential to wake up. And he went and he met him, and he was able to touch that seed of awakening, which was buried underneath there. He was able to touch that and wake it up. And within weeks, that man was on a journey into his spiritual life and into his awakening and into a sort of a redemption from his path. It was not easy for him because he had accumulated a lot of karmic push in the negative direction collectively, as well as in himself. And so there was a lot of pushback from that. It's a very interesting story to read about. But that's the Buddha manifesting Sataparibuddha. Like, I see you, I don't see you just someone who should be destroyed because of how evil and bad you are. I see that there's a seed of awakening in there, and I think I can touch it. And he went there. I'm not saying that we should just do that with everybody. The Buddha knew his capacity. The Buddha also stood in front of a raging elephant. It was tearing down the street and held up his hand, and the elephant met him and could sense his compassion and love and didn't trample him. I don't recommend going in front of the bulldozer of suffering and just saying, I see your beautiful awakened nature. You know if you see it. It's not an idea, right? It comes from somewhere else. But Sataparibuddha, in our daily life, we can wake up in small ways. Our perceptions about each other, check them. Are they really correct? Is it really supportive to the well-being of this person? If I'm constantly nagging at them, telling them what's wrong, right? Those kind of things. These are the small ways that Sataparibuddha can come into our life. And this has been a very important part of the Plum Village practice too. You could see how Siddhigarva needs this friend Sataparibuddha. Yeah. If you want Siddhigarva, you want to be in the hell realms, you want to be in the situations of suffering, you have to have behind you, you've got to have Sataparibuddha there, backing you up, helping you to see the possibility, or else you'll get drowned in the suffering. And these two bodhisattvas are very important in Thich Nhat Hanh's life. Even in the midst of the darkest hell realms, to stay present, to maintain the practice, not to despair. And to see the possibility of awakening in everyone, and not to discriminate. Right? Not to discriminate. Just because they look different, just because they belong to a different political party, just because they whatever. You don't see those lines when you practice Sataparibuddha. You only see the possibility of beauty and truth that can't be revealed. They landed in France. He was granted asylum in France. France is no friend to the Vietnamese. And from a certain perspective, right? He grew up watching his friends oppressed and killed by the French colonizers. Right? And yet he was there. He did not hesitate to offer his compassion and his presence to every person he met on the street. Anyone who would come to listen. Yeah. Sataparibuddha and Siddhigarva. So these are the bodhisattvas, the image of the human being in three actions: head, heart, and hands. and then supported by these great vows and great love. There's one more village which is really beautiful and important that we remember often, actually known as a Buddha, not a Bodhisattva, but pretty close. Maitreya. Maitreya is sometimes thought of as the Buddha to be born, yet to be born, a future Buddha. In Maitreya's name, there is Maitri. And Maitri is the word that is translated as loving kindness. When you study the 4 immeasurable minds, and we hear it in the mindfulness trainings, it's twice in the mindfulness trainings. Kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And when we do metta meditation, metta is coming from Maitri. This is loving kindness meditation. So this is the Buddha of loving kindness meditation. But it's also interesting, Maitri also comes from the word Mitra. And Mitra means friend. Friendship. The love and the kindness that supports, that is the substance of friendship. Real friendship. Spiritual friendship. Kalyana Mitra, a spiritual friend. So, Maitreya is the Bodhisattva, the Buddha of the Sangha. That's why Tai would say, the future Buddha is not going to be a person, but a Sangha. Because the substance of Maitreya is friendship. And that can't exist in one person alone. It has to live between us. And so when we build beautiful relationships, we build relationships built on presence and understanding and compassion with each other, right? We are opening the door for Maitreya Buddha, the Bodhisattva, friendship and love to manifest in the world. It's a wonderful thing. It makes me so happy to see how the practice of tens, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people around the world who in these recent generations have made an effort to renew their spiritual